Hello there, and welcome to episode 6 of the Or So She Says podcast. My name is Narissa Shea. I am an online coach, personal trainer, nutritionist, sport and exercise psychology consultant, yoga instructor, and a professional Irish dancer. Okay, so it has actually taken me over a month to sit down and actually record this episode, ironically, because life kept getting in the way. So, the topic I want to discuss today is what to do when life keeps throwing shit at you, or more eloquently put, life getting in the way. So, I'm going to begin today's podcast with 2 quotes. The first is from the book 101 Essays That Will Change the Way You Think by Brianna Wiest. You think problems are roadblocks to achieving what you want, when in reality, they are pathways. And the second is a quote from the famous Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Essentially, what these 2 quotes are getting at is that by simply running into a problem, it forces you to take action, which will inevitably lead you to think and behave differently. So the problem essentially pushes you from your comfort zone, and it actually becomes a catalyst for you to actualize the life you've always wanted. And just before I fully jump into this episode, a quote from me, Narissa. So eloquently put as well. You cannot keep pressing the fuck it button every time something goes wrong in your life. So when clients first sign up to me, they usually start off with like a 6-week introductory course where we cover all the basics of nutrition, training, we touch on a lot of mindset stuff. And what I've actually found over the last 2 years of coaching is that the clients that had the most challenges to face in their first 6 to 12 weeks of working with me were actually the ones that not only achieved the best results and maintained them, like physically, and from a mindset shift standpoint, but they are also the ones who are now flourishing in all areas of their lives, not just in regards to health and fitness. The people who had it the easiest for the 6 weeks, and by easiest, I don't mean like it was easy, but they had no social occasions for 6 weeks. They didn't have to encounter any injuries. They had no family emergencies. Yeah, they got like whopper results in 6 weeks. But as soon as life started throwing shit at them, they completely derailed and fell back to old habits because it got hard. Plot twist. It's always going to be hard. Life is hard. You have to change your mindset with regards to how to approach situations. And the biggest piece of advice I will give you is you need to learn to respond and not react to situations. FYI, this is where a coach comes in really handy. Like, it is literally our job to help you reframe situations. And we're kind of coming from an objective standpoint where we're not emotionally involved in your life. So, a couple of things I'm going to cover later on in the podcast are the 4 C's of mental toughness, how to respond and not react to situations, the importance of consistency over perfection with regards to alleviating the all or nothing mentality. And lastly, something that I randomly came across on TikTok earlier when I was scrolling, something called the region beta paradox. And it ties in so perfectly with this title today. I loved it. I saw it this morning. I was like, what are the chances of this being the first thing to come up? But before I discuss these, I am actually going to chat to you a little bit about my own life over the past few years, the shit that has got thrown at me, and how each and every one of those horrifically challenging scenarios was actually the making of me, all of which have catapulted me into what I can only describe so far, touch wood, as one of the best years of my life to date. Now, I know it's only February, but I have high hopes. If the year is going to go as well as it has since the start of the year, I'm pretty hopeful. I am also very aware that you can 100% hear Tigger barking in the background right now, but I have recorded this 3 times, and every time I get to near the end, he just starts barking. So I have just decided to roll with it because you know me, I like to show up as real online. So here we are. Tigger is 100% part of this podcast today. So I am going to throw it all the way back to 2020 when the pandemic crisis first hit. So I'm taking it back to around March 2020. I was actually abroad in Germany working for a dance company, and our tour was cut short. All my work I had lined up for the foreseeable future was cancelled, postponed. Absolute nightmare. But My nightmare actually began 2 weeks prior to this when I was dancing on a faulty stage and the stage came apart mid dance. Brilliant, I know. This resulted in a very shaky Narissa hobbling off the stage as gracefully as possible and ending up in a random German hospital with our friendly bus driver, Jurgen. I think every dancer has experienced that fear at one point or another throughout their careers. That what if? What if it's broken? How long am I going to be out for? That's all my work for the foreseeable future gone. I can't work a normal job. What am I going to do? Who hires someone on crutches? So I was in the hospital having all these horrible thoughts. And after what felt like an eternity of waiting for x ray results to come back, we eventually enjoyed a nice three-way conversation that I like to call Guess the Translation of the Diagnosis. So, from what I could gather straight away, doctor said no break. I started crying. I was delighted. And then they continued to inform me, oh, the band is nearly broken, which on further investigation, Google Translate of the diagnosis, came to realize that it was the ligament was close to snapping. Then, of course, the doctor came out with the big dreaded boot that I had to wear for 6 weeks, and I started crying. So we had approximately 2 weeks left of this tour, and with the fear of having no work to go home to, I actually took on a new role as costume lady. So the first 2 weeks of shows not dancing absolutely killed me. Like I was backstage, I was listening to the music, I was hearing where I would normally dance, where I'd normally change my shoes, everything. It was so overwhelming. It was so painful. Like I just cried so much, like every single day, cried when everyone was on the stage. And sometimes I find, though, as an artist, you get stuck in the mentality of this idea of stick to what you're good at. So, seeing as at the time I was doing fairly okay working as a professional dancer, I slowly became very content with being just that. That is, until I wasn't. When I got injured, I really felt like I lost my identity. I was so lost. Like, who am I if I can't dance? And after the initial stages of being flat out upset and angry over the situation, I came to realize that I'm not just a dancer and that maybe my contentment over the last few years was actually affecting me negatively. I became so comfortable with just doing dancing work and doing the same shows because it's all I'd ever done and I knew I could do it. I actually stopped challenging myself. I got to a point, I actually don't think I was even really enjoying what I was doing anymore. I was just taking each contract as it came because I was like, well, what else am I going to do? But at some point or another, I lost the love and the passion for it because I actually stopped challenging myself. Now, then this happened. And in this instance, I had absolutely no choice but to stick my thinking hat on and figure out what the fuck else in this world am I passionate about. And I came to the following conclusions. I have always loved all aspects of health and fitness. I love nutrition. I love delving into the workings of the mind and all things mindset. I love helping people. I have a good work ethic, so I could be my own boss and actually get stuff done. So maybe, just maybe, I should look into becoming a coach. So 2 years on, here I am working in the health and fitness industry as, dare I say it, self praise and all that jazz, a successful online coach. I adore what I do. And only for the biggest curveball to get thrown my way since, I don't know, potentially knocking out my front teeth just before my communion, who knows where I would have ended up. So, what I'm trying to get at here is I became very comfortable in what I perceived that I was very good at until that got completely flipped on its head. And now that doesn't mean I did not go through months of being so lost and so confused and not knowing what to do and crying and crying and crying because I thought my life was over if I couldn't dance. But then all of a sudden, there comes a point where you're fed up being angry, you're fed up being upset, and you're actually like, okay, what can I do about this? And I often get messages from my friends and stuff like that. And they're like, there was two types of people in this world when COVID hit. There's the type of people who sat around and just waited for it to be over. Or there's the type of people that just said, right, I can't fucking change this. What am I going to do about it? So I did my PT course, I went and did my nutrition course, went and did my yoga teacher training. And my friend is always saying to me, shout out to Kira Faber here. She's always like, Narissa, you're just such an inspiration as to what people can actually do when they're faced with adversity. And I was like, well, what do? You sit around and you hope for things to get better, or you make it fucking happen. And sometimes you have to hit that rock bottom stage to actually realize that you need to make a change. So that was story number one. And that actually resulted in me landing my dream job. Now, I can't believe I'm saying it now. If you asked me years ago, I would have never, ever imagined in a million years, never thought I'd find something I was as passionate about as dancing. I can wholeheartedly tell you now, I am more passionate and more in love with the job and the career I have right now than I am with dancing. I still do dancing work now, but it's not my main bread and butter. I take it because I want to do it and I enjoy it, but it's not my main job anymore. And ironically, now I love dancing more than I've ever loved it because it's not my identity anymore. So that was story number one. That was basically how I landed my dream job and how it actually came about because I had to face one of the biggest adversities in my life. So 2021 went fucking fab. Launched my own business. It was great. Went from strength to strength. I started putting out content on Instagram, not really thinking too much about it. I didn't have a strategy. I genuinely was just honest. Because before I launched my business, I actually remember deleting Instagram, being like, I am so fucking sick of all the shit I'm seeing on Instagram. It's just so fake. It's like this highlight reel of people's lives when, like, I knew behind the scenes other stuff was going on. And you do see this a lot in the dance world. Like, you see people portraying these ideas of tour and all being amazing. I've done it myself, when behind the scenes I was having an awful time. Like, we were tired, we were hungry. Like, you're seeing these snapshots of people getting ready in the dressing room, but some of the time you're not even in a dressing room, you're in a sports hall. Like, it's just, I just got really fed up with the falsity of online. So I deleted Instagram and I was like, no. Then I launched my business, obviously, because my business was going to be running online. I had to have Instagram. So a promise I made to myself was, I am going to show up online as honest as possible. And that has been my ethos since I started. A lot of the time when I share content, I try to share content that empowers people and it informs people, but a lot of the time I'm just telling my own story and people seem to resonate with it, and I get a lot of feedback from people saying thank you for being so honest. So something I've always promised to do was be honest. So I was showing up online just as myself, like just telling my own stories and my own struggles and my own pain points, and people tended to resonate with it, and then I attracted a lot of clients and my business was just going great, and I started getting a lot of awesome opportunities coming my way. Like, I started working for my protein and stuff like that, and things were going great. Like, this is not to say that I wasn't working extremely hard. Like, I can tell you, for the first 6 months of launching my business, I took one day off, and I wouldn't even say I took a full day off. Like, I was adamant that this was going to be the best thing I ever did, and I don't regret it at all. Anyone who'll tell you, if they launch a business, how much time and effort you have to put into it at the start. And this is why I always say to people when they look at this laptop lifestyle with people and they say, I would love to do that. And I say to people, you see the good side of the laptop lifestyle when you're seeing people working online. I was like, you don't see the days where them people had to work potentially 15, 16 hours in front of the laptop. You don't see the weeks where they have to work 14 days straight. I was like, when you run your own business and you're your own boss, you're the only person to do everything. And if you love it and you're passionate about it, then fire away, because you will do it. But it's one thing that I always point out to people when they ask for my advice about, like, whether they should go into online coaching. I say it is the most rewarding job you'll ever do in your life. Don't expect it to be a walk in the park, and don't expect it to be a 4-hour work week, not when you're launching your business. However, what I'm trying to get at here is 2021 was probably one of the best years of my life. Like, life was just going great. I had absolutely no social life, but I wasn't really too bothered about it. I kind of took a step back, just got really into fitness, really into training, really into studying, didn't really see many people. So social life took a bit of a back seat for quite a while, but it didn't really bother me at the time because my values and stuff were just like, I really want my business to be a success and I was really enjoying what I was doing. So to be honest, it didn't really bother me. So 2021 was amazing. And if you actually ask me now to point out any adversities that I had to face in 2021, I would say my biggest one was probably registering as self-employed, I mean, it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't really at all, but, like, literally that's the only thing that stands out to me in 2021. As well as that, like, I did some awesome stuff with my protein, like, I recorded my first video shoot, and that was super challenging, but I grew so much from it. Like, I got really, really good at talking in front of the camera and stuff like that. So even though it was completely out of my comfort zone, I got thrown into this video shoot where, like, there's these two big, massive cameras in your face, and you aren't scripted, you're just talking. And it gave me this confidence to be like, you know what, maybe I can show up a bit more on video and interact with people a little bit better, because that seems to be the form of media everyone listens to these days. So what I'm trying to get at here is 2021 was class, and 2021 Christmas was probably one of the best Christmases I ever had. There was just me, my mom, my dad, my uncle, and my ex-boyfriend, and we were just like sitting around drinking all day, just had a great Christmas. And I was really excited because I was actually heading away to Bali to do my yoga teacher training in the January. So Christmas was great. Then I flew over to Bali and got over there. I had to do a 10-day quarantine. And that was pretty rough, actually. Like, in hindsight, when I look back at it, it really, really forced me to sit with myself and realize that I had this incessant need to be busy all the time. And I think this was like me running away from feelings. Like, my anxiety was really bad when I was in quarantine. And I was just trying so hard to like keep busy. I was doing yoga every day. I had equipment there to be doing like workouts and stuff like that. I had my days planned to a T where I had calls and stuff with people. I was trying to pack in all the days because I was so anxious in that room, because I couldn't escape from it. I just had to like sit with myself. And in hindsight, now looking back on it a year on, I'm like, wow, that literally opened your eyes to your coping mechanism when shit goes sideways. I have to be busy all the time. So anyway, went and did my yoga teacher training, met some of the best friends. Like, they're still my best friends now. We talk all the time. I love them so much. And it was just an incredible experience. I got injured near the end of my yoga teacher training, and I actually had to do my exams with one arm, which in hindsight, once again, when it happened, I was angry and I was upset. And I got pulled by my teacher, who was my examiner. And they said, the fact that you couldn't demonstrate and you had to speak through that whole class was one of the best things that could have happened to you. They were like, that is going to make you the best teacher because you taught the class. You didn't put on a show for the class. And I was like, wow, it's actually true. So once again, shit situation turned it into something that actually became a positive. So then we fast forward to February, and I arrived home, and I actually booked my flights home earlier than I was supposed to come home. And I've absolutely no idea why. I had this gut feeling to just change my flights and come home early. And mom was like, why are you coming home early? And I was like, I don't know. I just have this gut feeling I need to come home. So I landed home, and my mom and Connor picked me up from the airport. And I was waffling on about the flight and who I was sitting beside, and this random man that kept asking for my number on the plane, and just all these funny things. And I noticed pretty quickly then they weren't saying anything and they were being really quiet. And I was like, what is going on? And then I was like, where's dad? And then they said he's in hospital. And I was like, well, I know he's in hospital, but you said that he was just in for like a routine check. And then they were like, okay, no, he didn't want us to tell you, but it's actually cancer. And my jaw just dropped. I was like, is he okay? Like, where is he? They were like, he's in Beaumont. He had to have an operation and he's not great. And I was like, what? I literally left this man 2 months ago, and I was playing cribbage, drinking pints with him, and we were having the best time. I was like, how has this happened in 2 months? And within like a day of me being home, he took such a bad turn in the hospital, and Beaumont started ringing us and they were like, you need to come in. We don't think he's going to make it through the night. And I was just shocked. Like, I mean, the amount of shock my body experienced last year, I just like, it's so hard to put into words unless you've experienced that type of shock in your life. Like, I was seeing spots when I was driving. I nearly crashed the car. Like, my whole body was shaking. And when we were driving in, I remember like I was overtaking cars on the back road. Like, I was just absolutely baiting it in to see him. got in. He just had wires everywhere. He was trying to pull out the wires. It was just so traumatizing to see someone you love so much and them be so strong and just to see them in so much pain. So, anyway, a week passed and dad being dad, anyone who'd know my dad would know that like he loves to surprise us. So 3 times we got called in that week to Beaumont and they were like, he's not going to make it through the night. He's have to come in. And my auntie came over from England and everything because she was like, God, I have to make sure I go and see him. All of a sudden we walked in one time and he's sitting up in the chair and he's talking. Now he had to have a tracheostomy, so he couldn't really talk properly. But he was trying to talk and he was like, so how was Bali and all? And I was just like, what? What? I was shocked. So anyway, he pulled around a little bit and he started to make improvements. Now we were told by the doctor, look, he has stage 4 COPD. We can't actually do the full treatment of radiotherapy on him. We're just going to do one and we'll hope for the best. And this kind of went on and on and on for a few weeks. And we were in and out of the hospital every second day from the beginning of March to the middle of June. And he got moved to a hospital near us and we were in and out all the time. He actually managed to come home for one day. And that night, I remember I couldn't sleep and I was sitting up in the sitting room and I heard this bang and I came down and he couldn't get his oxygen on and we had to ring the ambulance and I fainted and it was just such a traumatizing experience. And I think after that, when he woke up in the hospital and he knew he wasn't going to be able to come home again, he just went downhill. So then we got the call on the 18th of June that he passed away. Now, the reason why I'm telling you this story is because I think part of my purpose on this earth is to help people when they have to go through something like this. And what I will say is, even though people always tell me, God, you're so young to have lost a parent, I wholeheartedly believe that this is one of my purposes on this earth is to be able to help people go through something like this because it hurts at any age. It doesn't matter how old you are, your parent's your parent. We all have to experience it, unfortunately. And I do wholeheartedly believe that me having to go through it before a lot of my close friends is a calling of mine. So what I'm trying to get at here is we then went and had months of kind of just coasting. I was very much coasting. So what I'm trying to get at here is 2021 was the best year ever. 2022 was horrific. And from, I would say, June until December, I was very much in the denial stage of grief. Like I can't even fathom, like the whole year is a blur. Like I can't really remember much. All my best friends got married last year. They got engaged. We had hen parties. In between those events, my life was a blur. Like I kept my business afloat, which I'm really, really proud of, but I was very much surviving and not thriving. I wasn't really passionate about things. I didn't really know the kind of message I wanted to put out because you lose a bit of yourself when you lose someone. And I was like, there was times where I was just talking about fat loss and I was like, oh my God, like there's so much more important things in this world than this. And I found like people were afraid to kind of come to me with problems then because they were like, God, you actually have problems. And I was like, yeah, but I'm still your coach. And like, I got messages off clients there over the last while. And I was very, very open and honest about something that I kept to myself last year. And I actually started opening up to my clients about how hard last year was for me and how they have no idea how much that they got me through last year more than I got them through. So they were all like, but Narissa, your check-ins were still amazing. You were still so motivating, this, that, and the other. I had no idea you were going through all this. And I was like, I know, but a lot of the time you don't know what people are going through behind the scenes. And it was nice for them to hear that I was struggling as well, because I think people can get this idea in their head when they see coaches and stuff like that, that, oh, that little positive Polly, like happy go lucky, turns everything around. No, the reality of it was for 6 months last year, I was in full on fucking denial that I'd lost my best friend. I was just like, no, like I don't want to talk about it. I'd get really angry when people bring it up because I just changed the topic. I was like, I don't want to talk about it. And that was all well and good until December hit and Christmas was coming up. And I shifted so quickly from the denial stage of grief to the anger stage of grief. I was angry at everything. I was angry at life. I was angry at Christmas. I was angry at people. I was angry at people trying to talk to me and ask me my Christmas plans. Like, I got angry when people would mention, "Are you putting a tree up?" Like, I am a very positive person and I try to take the positives out of everything in life. And if you've ever met me or if you listen to my podcast, I think you can probably tell that from me. I really, really try to reframe any situation and I try to see other people's points of view and stuff like that. But fuck me, December. I was the angriest person I've ever come across in my life. I was arguing with the kitchen table if it argued back to me. Like, I was still managing to stay on top of my clients and still actually managed to retain all of those clients I had in December, which I'm absolutely shocked. So shout out to you who stuck with me, because they were like, I had no idea you were feeling like this. And I was like, yeah, well, anyway, so much anger. And then Christmas came about, and like, I was arguing with my ex so much at the time, like we just couldn't see eye to eye on anything. And then Christmas rolled around and we got Christmas out of the way. And I was like, oh, okay, I feel a bit better now. Christmas is out of the way. Then I actually went down to do a Vipassana retreat, which is a silent meditation retreat. And I lasted a day, 10 hours meditating, no phone, no laptop, no distractions, no nothing, just you sitting there with your own septic thoughts for 10 hours. I'll tell you one thing, if you ever just want to see the shit that's going to come up in your head, just even do it for a day. It was traumatizing, but once again, it was the most amazing thing I could have done. Now, I wasn't in a good headspace. My mental health was in the toilet in December, so I lasted a day and then I came back. And I kept up the meditation though, and I actually had this weird sense of relief. They always describe these meditation retreats as, think of your mind as a septic wound. In order for that septic wound to heal, you have to let all of the pus bubble to the surface, and then you can remove it, and then the wound can heal. Now, with regards to the mind, you have to let all of those repressed feelings and all the anger and all the sadness and all the pain I was pushing down for the whole year just bubble to the surface, and it exploded. And now, in fairness, I wasn't in the right headspace to do 10 days of it, but even the day showed me what I needed to do going forward. So that was that. And then to summarize really quickly how the year ended up, me and my ex broke up New Year's Eve. So that was kind of the icing on the cake. Now, look, no badness there. Shout out if you're listening. This is probably why it took me this long to record this episode, because I wanted to actually freely talk about this. Like, there's no badness there. We're still friends. Like, I just want the best for him. He wants the best for me. But obviously, breakups still suck when they happen. And New Year's Eve was just the icing on the cake of a fucking shite year, right? So New Year's Day, I felt extremely sorry for myself, okay? And I cried and cried and cried. I was like, oh my God, I lost my best friend and I lost my boyfriend in 5 years and this, that, and the other. And I can't believe I'm 33 and I'm single and blah, 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 blah. And oh my God, life is so hard. And then something happened on the 2nd of January where it's like all that septicness came to the surface and just cleared. I sat down with myself and I was like, right, what do I want from life now? Like, literally, what do I want without having to consider anyone else's feelings? What do I want? Right. And I wrote down my goals for my career. I wrote down my goals for like life in general, did a mood board, did all this, started getting really excited about life again. And I was like, you know what? This is going to be a great year. I can tell. So all of a sudden then I started raising my vibration, my energy. All of a sudden, these amazing opportunities started landing on my lap again. Like, got more cool opportunities with my protein. Other people were reaching out for me to start doing stuff. I started going out and having a good fucking time again. Like, I started going out every weekend with my friends again, and actually just finding this balance between the really, really fun Narissa who was there years ago, who took partying a bit too hard. But then over the last 2 years, I went the complete opposite way and wasn't out at all. So now I found this balance between like being able to go out and have a good time and have the crack, but also while working really hard during the week and stuff like that. And I actually ended up showing up better for my clients and for my job because I'm more relatable now. I got more clients in the last while since I've been putting up pictures of going out in the session stuff than I've got in the last like year. And I think it's because my clients always say to me, the reason why I signed up to you is because you're human and you're relatable. And I was like, yeah, that's true. That's true. So I just started saying, you know what? Here we go. I'm just going to be me again. And like, it's actually resulted in this year, touch wood so far, being just one of the best years of my life today already. And I'm so excited for this year. Like, I have so much cool plans coming up this year. But once again, I'm going to tell you, I would have never got to this place that I am if I didn't go through all that. So the point I'm trying to make here is that life does not always go to plan, and as much as situations suck at the time, a lot of the time, challenging situations are going to be the making of people. And that doesn't mean they're easy. That doesn't mean they're fair. And that doesn't mean that at the time you're not really, really struggling to see why you have to go through this. And believe me, I had 6 months of that last year. But I'm at a place of acceptance now and feeling that this is my purpose to be able to openly speak about what happened last year. It took me a long time to get here. People were asking me, will I do a podcast and talk about my dad and everything? And I was like, I'm not ready. But when I'm ready, I'll know. And it took a lot for me to kind of come up and show this vulnerable side, because I think people often find that coaches just want to talk about these topics of mindset and fat loss and training and all these things. But the reality of it is, what's something we all have to experience in our lives? Grief and loss. How does that impact our lives? It impacts our lives greatly. And it's important to talk about these things. And I don't think it's talked about enough. So it's a reason why I wanted to incorporate this into this podcast. Now, I promise I will move on to this topic from a more coaching standpoint, but I just wanted you to fully understand my backstory. And if I can firmly believe that everything that happened last year was the reason why I'm here today, then I think whatever you're going through in your life at the moment, you need to stay strong in the fact that it will be the making of you one day. Well, if you made it this far, lads, and you haven't switched off, fair play. I promise I am getting on to this topic now from a more coaching standpoint. There's this old Yiddish adage, right, called man tracht und Gott lacht. I think that's how it's pronounced. Basically means man plans, God laughs. So despite our most careful planning, the road of life is unpredictable, and we need to learn how to navigate this road and embrace the journey with all its ups and downs and swings and roundabouts. So I work primarily as a female fat loss coach, and it's fair to say that there are quite a few of those swings and roundabouts. The one thing I tell my clients when they begin working with me is that for any plan to work, it needs to become a lifestyle change and not a 6-week get shredded quick diet and exercise plan. It is about consistency over perfection, showing up for yourself as much as possible on any given day and focusing on long-term sustainable habits, because it is your consistency over time that will get you to your goals. So what I'm going to talk about firstly is consistency over perfection always, and the importance of alleviating that all or nothing mentality. So above anything else, the most important factor in achieving results in anything is consistency. I was actually listening to this amazing podcast on the High Performance Podcast, and they talked about consistency. And I really like to say to my clients, like, one of the best things I heard 2 years ago was this quote that said, if you never give up, you can't fail. And it's so true. Are you going to encounter slips in the road? Absolutely. But if something is worth having, is it not worth trotting through those times and just realizing that you can either look at mistakes as learning curves or you can let them completely derail you? You just have to remain consistent. You need to step away from the all or nothing mentality and thinking that every day needs to be perfect. Life happens, and that is okay. And you cannot let that derail your progress. It is more important that you remain consistent and patient. So, from a practical application standpoint, when it comes to calories, what is more important than having a good day is actually looking at your weekly and monthly averages. When it comes to your step count and your NEAT activity, again, what is more important is your weekly and monthly averages. You do not gain and lose weight in a day. And if you did, sorry to tell you, that is not fat. Do you ever go out on a night in the beer and not have your dinner and drink vodka all night and step in the scales and all of a sudden you're down 2 kilos the next day? You haven't lost 2 kilos. You're literally extremely dehydrated. Sorry to burst your bubble if you did that today. It is your actions over time that are going to get you results. And you have to switch from that all or nothing thinking to always something. Switch from all or nothing to always something. doing something is better than doing nothing. Like, does this sound familiar? You might start off with the greatest of intentions. You're absolutely buzzing with motivation to start this new diet and exercise plan. You paid a fortune for it. Nothing is going to stand in your way. And you're going to cut out chocolate, bread, wine. You're going to train 6 times a week. And then something happens. Life happens. Work is crazy. Your child gets sick. You get injured. Maybe a loved one becomes terminally ill. And all of a sudden, you launch into the chocolate, the wine, everything in between, and throw all ideas of training out the window. When life happens, you have two options. You throw in the towel and press the fuck it button and eat rings around yourself, ditch the gym, ditch any activity, and just say fuck it. Or you draw a line under what has happened and move on. You cannot change the past, but you can decide to respond, not react to past events. So this is bringing me on to my second topic: respond, don't react. So what if you had a pastry and a latte for breakfast instead of your planned out high protein yogurt and fruit? Maybe have a high protein lunch with some extra fruit and veggies and do something similar for dinner. You don't have time to go to the gym today. Oh my God, carnage. Instead of once again being reactive and saying, okay, if I can't go to the gym, I may as well just sit on the couch for the evening. No, go for a walk after your dinner. And maybe you have time, like go for a walk on your lunch break. Imperfect action is better than perfect inaction. Imperfect action is the way forward. You need to step away from thinking everything needs to be perfect and to plan. Regularly practicing imperfect action is a phenomenal way of changing your mindset and rewiring bad habits. So when I talk about respond, don't react, there's this incredible quote by Viktor Frankl, the guy who wrote Man's Search for Meaning. He says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. So I talk about this a lot. I talk about it a lot with clients who suffer from binge eating or potentially emotional eating. And it's the power of the pause. It's actually something I talk about a lot when I talk about the benefits of meditation, but honestly, it goes for everything in life. Now, I'm not here to tell you all about the benefits of meditation and how it changed my life. I'll save that for another day in another podcast. But I will talk about is the changes that have occurred in my life since I started. And it all comes back to the power of the pause. So I am a hot-headed, passionate Scorpio who does not like to be wrong. And it is fair to say that over the years, I was always someone who reacted and did not respond when something happened in my life. When something happened that really triggered me and threw me off plan, I would instantly fly off the handle or get myself into a tizzy over every little situation that didn't go to plan. We need to realize that we cannot control our external circumstances. We can't, like full stop, end of conversation. As much as we try to control everything in our lives, we can't. That is life. But what can we control? Because that's all that's important, is focusing on what we can control. And what we can control here is our reaction. So when life throws you a curveball, take a moment and breathe and assess. How can I respond to this in a way that my future self will thank me for? And sometimes, believe it or not, when life throws massive curveballs at you and everything gets turned upside down, it is usually paving the way for something new and exciting to enter your life. Take, for example, everything that happened to me last year. At the time, it was just a massive curveball, but I do firmly believe now that, like a lot of these adversities and stuff over the last few years that I've had to go through, they paved the way to get me to where I am. Like my dream job. Or like my horrifically dramatic falling through a stage injury. Hashtag drama queen. I never thought in a million years I was going to find a job I was as passionate about as dance. But seeing my clients flourish and grow warms my heart in a way that performing to thousands of people on a big lit up stage in a massive arena couldn't even match. This then brings me on to something that I love to talk about a lot. And it gets a bad rep because we're in the age of self-compassion and being self-compassionate and X, Y, and Z, which is very important. But I'm actually a firm believer in proactive self-compassion. Instead of just, oh, hashtag self-care Sundays, I'm like, no, you need to ask yourself in any given situation, what can I do now that my future self will thank me for? And a really good way of practicing this actually is to start practicing delayed gratification. We literally live in a society where we can have anything at the touch of our fingers. Like instant gratification is everywhere. You want a burrito and you live in Dublin, you whip out your phone and you will have a burrito in your hands without walking anywhere within like 20 minutes. So, like, we live in a society that's constantly bombarding us with instant gratification. And another example of instant gratification is like snoozing your alarm and stuff like that. So, a really good way of practicing this proactive self compassion is actually by practicing delayed gratification. That is honestly my biggest piece of advice. Like, and the best way to do that, what can I do now that my future self is going to thank me for? Probably when shit turns sour and life throws shit at you, the easy option is to turn to the bottle of wine. That's instant gratification. The delayed gratification is, you know what? Maybe I'm going to go out for a walk, listen to a podcast, and guess what? Your future self is probably going to thank you for the second. There's always going to be a situation where you need a bottle of wine with your friends as well. But in the grand scheme of things, not reaching to that kind of thing every single time shit goes wrong is probably going to benefit you in the long run. So something I love to talk about a lot actually is mental toughness. So people always tell me, oh, Narissa, you have a great mindset. You have a great mindset. You have a good outlook with things. But I didn't always have that. Like I wasn't always mentally tough. Like I had to practice a lot of this stuff. And I do genuinely practice what I preach 99.9% of the time. So the academic definition for mental toughness is having the natural or developed psychological edge that enables you to generally cope better than your opponents with the many demands, competition, training, lifestyle that sport places on a performer. Specifically, be more consistent and better than your opponents in remaining determined, focused, confident, and in control under pressure. Now, coming from a sports psychology background, I can attest to the vast importance placed on mental toughness when working with elite athletes and performers. It really is the difference between someone succeeding in their desired sport and someone who does not. Notice, though, how the above definition states natural or developed. Mental strength is something one can learn. Like any skill, it just takes practice and patience. But what about in your everyday life? Can mental toughness be something that your everyday gym goer or everyday person could benefit from? My honest opinion is absolutely. Because mental toughness is the ability to resist, manage, and overcome doubts, worries, concerns, and circumstances that prevent you from succeeding or excelling at a task or towards an objective or a performance outcome that you set out to achieve. Therefore, is this not an attribute that everyone could benefit from having in every area of their life? Like many people struggle to achieve their goals in life, be it fitness goals, career goals, physique goals, etc. I could literally write a fucking book on the myriad of reasons as to why most people don't achieve their goals. Victim mentality, instant gratification, negative thinking, catastrophizing, perfectionism. This list is a long one, and that is another one for another day and another podcast. But for the sake of this podcast, we aren't focusing on why people can't achieve their goals. We are focusing on something people can start implementing today in order to help them move closer to their goals and overcome these adversities, okay? And developing mental toughness is going to allow you to remain focused, confident, and under control in times of pressure. It also allows you to cope better than others with the difficulty of things like hard training, diet, competition, life. And it helps you to rebound from one of the hardest things to come back from, failure, which, as I said earlier, in my honest opinion, your opinion on failure is going to dictate how you respond to it. If you can see failures as learning curves, that's one of the best things you can ever do in this life. I was such a perfectionist. I was a neurotic perfectionist growing up. And I think a lot of that was to do with my competitive career in dancing, where you were right or wrong. There was no in between, and mistakes are deemed unacceptable, especially in the competitive world. So, of course, I developed this neurotic perfectionism where everything had to be perfect. Whereas now, over the last few years, I've been really practicing like imperfect action and just putting things out when I know they're not perfect. Like the first few episodes of this podcast where my microphone was fucking shit, I still put it out. I was like, meh, it's not great. I'm still making editing mistakes, but I'm still going to put it out because doing that is more productive than doing nothing at all. In his book, Developing Mental Training, there's a psychologist called Peter Clock, and he describes 4 important traits of mental toughness, which he calls the 4 C's: confidence, challenge, control, and commitment. So, challenge is like, how much do you see challenge as an opportunity? Challenge is all about your ability to perceive tasks that you're presented with as either an opportunity for gain or growth. It's about how effective you are at looking for the positive, no matter how bad or overwhelming the situation. And in order to grow strong mentally, you must face adversity head on, embracing the suffering in order to come out the other end stronger. Like scientific studies have also found that this perception is at the core of many elite athletes' mental toughness, including Olympic champions, mixed martial artists. They view stressors as opportunities for growth, development, and mastery, actively taking part in challenging activities to help develop their ability to deal with adverse situations. They learn through training, effort, and work, gaining new skills, perspectives, better relationships, and greater confidence. Therefore, when you are faced with a problem, a setback, a failure, you need to ask yourself, what can I learn from this experience in order to grow, in order to progress me towards my goal? Mistakes are only mistakes if you do not fucking learn from them. The next one then is confidence. So, what is your level of self belief? Confidence was identified as one of the key components and main strategies utilized by Olympic champions and mixed martial arts fighters. And it kind of underpins the whole mental resilience model. Confidence comes in 2 forms: confidence in abilities and interpersonal confidence. So, with regards to abilities, confidence in abilities is the belief that you possess the necessary ability to achieve your goals. It's so important because when you're confident, you think and act in a much more effective manner than when you are not confident. The most confident and motivated individuals look to face problems straight on, such as competitions and training, and they're willing to take big risks as they are confident in their ability. Something I was listening to on that high performance podcast, and oh my God, I resonated so much with it, is they had a guy on and his name is Mark Manson. You've probably heard of him. He's a best-selling author. And they talk about this delusional positivity, right? And he has this amazing part in the podcast where one of the hosts just says, I am 100% a delusional positive person. He was like I'm talking to you, Mark, right? And I'm already thinking like we're going to get on great and I'm going to get his number and we're going to meet up in America and we're going to do this and then we might even do this TV series together. He's like, I am so down the rabbit hole, like that we're already best friends and I've never even met you because I'm just delusionally positive about these things. And he was like, 80% of the time, these things don't work out the way they are in my head. But he was like, I get such a buzz out of like narrating these potentially positive life experiences that might happen. And I held laughing at this because this is me to a T. I take an idea and I fucking run a mile with it. And I am already 10 steps ahead in my head that this is going to be this massive idea and this is going to do great and this and maybe we're going to be best friends and I only met them but we're definitely going to, and it's hilarious, like, but it's all delusional positivity, but it's not a bad thing. Like, it's not a bad thing. Like 80% of the time the things in my head don't work out, but the 20% of the time they do, I'm like, yeah, I knew that was going to happen. And like people can say, oh yeah, you're a positive Polly and all. I am. Like literally most of the time I am positive, but like it works in my favor because when people tend to have an outlook like that, they're open to new opportunities and they believe that trying new things is actually a good thing, as opposed to people who just catastrophize everything and they're like, oh well, if I meet that person then that other person is going to think that and this, that and the other, and bad, negative, 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 and they end up down a sea of what ifs, and then they don't do anything, and they've just paralysis by analysis. They don't try anything because they've ended up in this negative self-talk in their head. Whereas, like, there is something to be said about being delusionally positive and not toxic positivity. I'm not saying don't feel your feelings. I think I've talked enough in this episode already about crying and the amount of crying I do. I feel my feelings, but am I delusionally positive a lot of the time? Yeah, and I fucking love it. I love my life. I love the way my mind thinks now. I didn't always, but I do now. But like, I do have that level of delusional positivity, and it ties in very well here with the confidence thing. Because if someone comes at me with this massive challenge, like I have been challenged with over the last few years since launching my business, I don't paralyze myself into all these reasons why I can't do it now. I say fucking yes to every single opportunity, and then I figure out how to do it. I have done that 3 times this week already. And when I mean one of them was the most terrifying yeses, I was really on the fence about saying yes to it. And I just said yes in the moment. And afterwards, I was like, should I have said yes? And I was like, I'll figure it out. And that is a mantra I always have. And it's something my dad always used to tell me. He'd be like, say yes and then figure out how to do it. And I was like, right, grand. So that's what I've been doing. Seems to be working quite well for me. But like, anyway, interpersonal is another form of confidence then. So this comes down to your level of assertiveness. So like high levels of interpersonal confidence means that you're able to perform better under pressure, voice your opinion when in a group, influence others and lead them. And this is important in all areas of life. And I actually wholeheartedly believe that we need to approach health and fitness in a more holistic way. People doing well in their jobs and thriving in relationships are probably finding that their training is improved and vice versa. So, something I always highlight to my clients is like everything is correlated. You start thriving in one area of life, it usually spills into other areas. So, improving confidence in any area is going to impact the other, and it's all cyclical. Like, as I said, like, when I started off this year and I started vibing a little bit higher and things were going a little bit well in life, all of a sudden all these new opportunities kept coming and I wasn't afraid to say yes to them. Like if this opportunity that landed on my lap this week was asked of me back in December, I would have said no. And because I was like, oh, it's just too much. It's too much to take on. And I won't be able to do that. I have said yes to so many massive things this year that scared the life out of me. But I'm so excited to do them because I know that I'll be able to do it. I just need to put my head down and actually do it. Which brings me on to the next C, which is commitment. So, what's your ability to stick to tasks? Commitment is about the individual's ability to keep going no matter what obstacles they face. It's about staying disciplined to the task, working towards the goal when you really do not want to. The truth is, there's always going to be obstacles, a reason to stop, and distractions in your way. It's your mind's ability to ignore all stimuli irrelevant to the task and just continue no matter what. We may not always have motivation, but we will always have discipline. The better you become at practicing delayed gratification and asking yourself in any given situation, what can I do now that my future self will thank me for? The better you will become at this. And each time you choose to carry out actions in line with your values and goals, you reaffirm the belief in your ability to do what needs to be done, which in turn increases your confidence. So then this brings me on to control, okay? How much do you actually believe that you control your destiny? Control is another one that's divided into two subcomponents. So the first is life control, which is the extent to which we believe we are in control of what happens to us. And the second is emotional control and our ability to control our anxieties, frustrations, anger, and other emotional states. Life control. Do we inherently believe we shape our own future or are we victims of circumstance? I talk a lot about this when I talk about victim mentality and people thinking that life is happening to them and not around them. Okay. So, from David Goggins' Accountability Mirror to Buddhist Noble Eightfold Path, it is about believing we can make a difference and take affirmative action to control our life's path. You cannot control your circumstances. I've talked about this before, but you can control your reaction. And it is important to focus on what you can control and to take responsibility. Every external event in your life that you don't control offers you an area you can control, and that is your response. And it is not the events themselves that make us unhappy, but our interpretation of those events. So you need to take responsibility and choose no longer to give outside events such power over you. which then brings me on to emotional control. So, strong emotions and the suffering they cause is referred to by Buddhists as dukkha. The whole Buddhist philosophy is actually based on controlling your emotions in order to control your suffering. So, this is not to say that we must avoid emotions, like quite the opposite. It's about embracing our emotions, controlling them, and redirecting them for your own good rather than letting them work against you. Like, emotions are powerful influences on our mentality, motivation, and actions. Realize that just like our thoughts, our emotions pass in time, and we are not our emotions, nor are we our thoughts. We are merely the observers of them. Something I often say here as well is like it can be very tempting to steer ourselves away from negative emotions. Like we have this huge thing in society today, though depression, anxiety. I have anxiety, I feel anxious, I feel depressed. And how we label them emotions is very, very important. Like saying that I am depressed or I am anxious is completely different and gives you no power over it, as opposed to saying I feel anxious and I feel depressed. And in this day and age, we're all shying away from these feelings of anxiety and depression. Now, if it's clinical anxiety or it's clinical depression, yes, you need medication, you need all these things. But everybody feels anxious and everybody feels depressed. And we have this thing in society today where people just try to run away from these feelings because they're uncomfortable. But your feelings are just guideposts. Like I read an amazing book years ago and it changed my life because I had really bad anxiety at the time. It's called Anxiety is the Way or something. I'll have to look that up for you. But it just proved to me that when I was feeling anxious, it was my body's way of trying to tell me that something wasn't right. And the more I leaned into it, and this is where meditation came in as well, I stopped trying to like run away from these feelings. I sat with the feelings and let them pass and realized the more I repressed these feelings and ran away from them, the more the anxiety took over me. And a really funny thing is actually, I talked about this in a podcast before about anxiety and stuff like that and how it used to cripple me. I actually haven't been experiencing it as bad since I started meditating more because when I used to feel anxiety or anxiety, I used to like start getting really overwhelmed with all these feelings in my head. And I was like, oh my God, and this. But instead of running from them now, I actually just sit with them and I'm like, okay, I feel anxious. Why do I feel anxious? I feel anxious because of X. Why? Because of Y. Why? Because of Z. And then I get to the root of it and I'm like, oh, but I actually don't feel like I'm fine. I'm actually fine. And it goes away instead of trying to run from it. So we have this thing in society now where we're just obsessed with avoiding negative feelings because we don't want to feel bad. But actually, like part of being human is feeling all the spectrums of emotion. And we can't just feel happiness all the time. In order to feel the happiness to the level that you want to experience happiness, you have to experience the sadness on the other end of the spectrum. So, thanks to like 30 years of work by a couple of people that I can't pronounce their names, one of them being Peter Clock, and a couple of their colleagues, a valid and reliable way of measuring mental toughness is actually readily available. And there are questionnaires you can fill out online to determine your scores in various areas of mental toughness. And it's actually called the MTQ Plus, the Mental Toughness Questionnaire. And it measures an individual's resilience and ability to cope with pressure and change around scales of challenge, control, commitment, and confidence. And the questionnaire is online, it's well validated, and I think it only takes approximately like 15 minutes to finish. So, being stronger, fitter, faster, leaner, and outperforming others starts with the mind. Your mind gives up before your body does, always. Like, in order to be mentally tough, you have to develop the 4 C's. And notice how I say develop here and not just innately born with such strengths. Like any skill in life, mental toughness takes time and patience to acquire. It does not just appear overnight. People don't expect to go in and deadlift 2 times their body weight overnight when they've never done it before. But when it comes to facets of the mind and meditation and anything involving the mind, people get frustrated that they don't notice improvements immediately. And this is often the case, like, as I said, when people begin to meditate. So, like, my take home advice here is complete the questionnaire, see where you measure up on each of these scales, because what gets measured gets managed. And then sit down with yourself and decide on your goals and how you are going to achieve them. You need to be clear on your values and get clear on your why, and then use every opportunity that arises as a test of your mental strength. You have got to train your mind to become stronger than your emotions, or else you'll lose every single time. So this is a really long podcast. The last thing I'm going to touch on really quickly was just really funny because it ties in perfectly with what we're talking about today. And it popped up on my TikTok this morning. And it's something called the region beta paradox, right? So the region beta paradox is the phenomenon that people can sometimes recover more quickly from more distressing experiences than less distressing ones. So the hypothesized reason is that intense states trigger psychological defense processes, and that reduces the distress, while less intense states do not trigger the same psychological defense process, and therefore less effective attenuation of the stress occurs. Put quite fucking simply, here's an example. If someone is currently in a mediocre romantic relationship, they will be less likely to end it to find an excellent relationship than if their relationship was fucking chronic, thus making their current overall situation worse. Same could be said if you're in a mediocre job. The job's fine, pays the bills, it's grand, everything is fine. In Ireland, we love that, it's fine. And like, I think that's kind of something that happened with me a bit over the years, is like the mediocre job was the dancing. And like the thing with the relationship was there was nothing inherently wrong. Like no one did anything bad. And sometimes that's worse. You know, if someone cheats on someone or someone does something really bad, then they're going to break up with them because that was awful and it's a definitive line. But this was kind of just like, what do you do when two people just drift apart? And like, it's harder then to call it because it is that middle ground. So sometimes, like, these horrific experiences that happen to us, like, they're actually really, really good catalysts. It's the universe telling you, like, you need to take action on this right now, or else I'm going to start giving you some bigger signs. So, to conclude today, I am just going to take it right back to the start and just remind you of those quotes, okay? You think problems are roadblocks to achieving what you want, when in reality, they are pathways. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. And lastly, the most important one, my own quote: you cannot keep pressing the fuck it button every time something goes wrong. My main piece of advice here is, when it comes to life throwing shit at you, life is always going to throw shit at you. And no matter how great someone's life looks online, guaranteed they're being thrown shit too. But the only thing you can do is choose your response to these situations. Also, reach out for help. Like, reach out for help and don't be afraid to reach out for help. But equally, give yourself the power sometimes to take back a little bit of that power by taking a step back, taking a breath, and realizing you have more power than you think. And that power lies in you choosing to respond to this situation instead of react to it. If you got to the end of this podcast, thank you so much for listening. Please let me know if you enjoyed it in the comments. If you haven't already, I'd love if you could give me a rating on Spotify. And also, if you want to subscribe, just so you make sure that you get a notification every time I come with a new episode. Thank you so much for listening. As always, my DMs on Instagram are always open if you want to reach out or you have any questions. My name is Narissa_Shea Fitness. Have a fantastic day and I will be back soon. I promise I won't leave it this long. I just was, life getting in the way. That's why I didn't get this one done as soon as I wanted to.